Nigga live right now, man. It's going down, excited for the season. You know, we coming off a playoff win. I mean, you know, we had a couple wins.
Hello, and welcome to Diaries, a Milwaukee Bucks podcast presented by us, the staff of Brewhoop. My name is Riley Feldman, one of your usual co-hosts, coming to you on a Monday afternoon. If you're watching on YouTube, Brewhoop's YouTube page, you will see that my background is a little lit up. That's how you know we're recording on a different time. Figured because of the old back-to-back that the Bucks just got through, it'd be better to record on Monday, so we had the full sample size to review. Kyle is in Cancun. Adam is also out of town. I can't remember exactly where he is, but I hope both my usual co-hosts are doing well. And I'm happy to be joined by the wonder from down under, Jack Traherne. Jack, how are you doing this morning? Also, people should note, those who watch the playback.tv/brewhoop, it's looking a little bit darker over by you. How are you doing this morning?
Yeah, not too bad, Riley. Yeah, it's still hot over here, but yeah, it's a bit of a gloomy day, to be honest, outside. But yeah, doing well, probably doing better than the Bucks after last night. But we hope they can get back on the right track.
Yes, I agree. And I think it's a beautiful thing that we'll have the two people who did the playback and were clearly extremely frustrated at the Bucks' performance last night being the ones who will come in today to assess how the Bucks did on the week that was. Let's just run through the results real quick before we talk about what we learned. So it was a strange week. This was the week where they made up for that game delayed for New Orleans. They haven't played that game yet, but because of the schedule shifts, this was the first shift that we saw. So they started the week on the road last Tuesday at the Atlanta Hawks, won that game 127-121 in impressive fashion, given the fact that Atlanta is usually a tough out for the team. Came back to Milwaukee, played the hapless and getting more hapless by the day Dallas Mavericks in a 137-107 laugher. If you go back and watch the playback review of that, basketball discussed is maybe 5% of the broadcast. Everything else and anything else was discussed instead. And then the second back-to-back of the week, Saturday, starts with a 109-111 loss to the Magic. Kind of a little bit of a fumbling at the very end of the game. We can get into that. And then finally, last night's Sunday, 100-112 loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Final score is slightly complimentary of the Bucks. It was kind of, I think Ryan Rollins went crazy for 8 points by himself over the course of a minute to make it look a little bit better. But to be absolutely honest, after halftime, through the early portion of the fourth quarter, it was pretty much over for the Bucks. So some good stuff and some bad stuff. Jack, I think there's a lot that we could say what we learned about the Bucks, but what in particular did you learn about the team this past week?
Yeah, so it's kind of like, as we watched the game yesterday, I was just sort of thinking like, you just come to the realization that like they are sort of a step below the top three teams in the East, and definitely like probably the top two. And my kind of I learned this week was that the Bucks are missing something that the best teams have, and that's like I use the word system. It's like a system of ball movement and a system that emphasizes getting people involved and moving the defense around. And I think I watch them and I think they're just a tad more disconnected than those top teams, and they can skate by against certain teams the way they play. But if the goal is to win a championship, I really think they have to course correct. Like, I don't know if it's possible, but I think they have to course correct and like, what is the strategy to beat these teams that are above us? Because we can't do it right now, and what we're doing isn't working.
Do you want to run through? You got some stats. We were able to pull up some stats. So agreed. And I got some follow-up questions for you as a former hooper to be able to help diagnose the problem. So I know you pulled up some isolation stats, some assist numbers. What do those look like for the Bucks? Does it match the eye test that you just made the case for right there?
Yes. Yeah. So the Bucks, they run ISO 8.7% of the time, which is the sixth highest in the league. and they are the 8th most effective with it. But they have a bottom third free throw frequency off ISO, so they don't get to the free throw line at all. They're 23rd overall in assists per game in the league. And so, yeah, it just doesn't seem like that method to the madness really like works as well as it should be. And like if that's the chosen strategy they're going with, it doesn't seem like that's really going to bring them to the promised land. And I want to shout out to you. You actually helped out with those stats that I just read. But yeah.
Yeah. So when I'm looking at the numbers, when I'm thinking about the team, I guess from an isolation perspective, you wonder how much better they would be if Dame got the whistle that you would hope he would get.
Yes. Yeah.
Think of how many possessions, and we commented on it last night, where if you are another team and you're trying to determine how are we going to how are we going to defend Damian Lillard, if I'm the bench guard who comes in, I'm just going to grab him as soon as he beats me off the dribble at the pick, because the refs are just not going to call it. Like if I grab early enough and then release early enough, they're just not going to call it. So that corresponds with the really low free throw frequency rate. Giannis has always gotten a bad whistle because he's just a physical beast, and it's hard, I think, for referees to ref him. And it's like Shaq, you could call a foul every single time down if you wanted, but they don't. So that all corresponds, which drops things, because if you're going to ISO that much, you got to try and get to the line as much, like as often as you possibly can. I think I wonder, so when you look at that, though, you look at the numbers, you look at the way they play, is it to you a responsibility of the coaching staff? Is it a player responsibility? Let's not say fault, but where does the impetus for a fix like that come from, in your opinion? And I know it's going to be a mix, but like who do you think is most responsible for changing that?
I mean, my inclination is to, oh God, it really is tough, because like under 3 different coaches, it feels like Giannis has been playing this, like especially Giannis has been playing the same way for his whole career. Like he's really got some habits that he has developed over time, which make it tough to say if like Doc sort of, and this isn't just about Giannis, it's a whole team, but like just from that standpoint, if Doc is telling him these things and they're just not getting through, or is Doc like just trying to be best friends with Giannis and Dame and stuff? So he you know, like people say Doc is a player's coach. I mean, I don't know. It's tough to tell if like Doc is like, does Doc get mad at them when they're not moving the ball, or does he just kind of, because in the post-game press conferences, it sounds like, I mean, he had some comments last night, but it sounds like for the most part he's going to back up his guys. But is that different in public and private? I don't know, but yeah, that would be my answer. Is it's really tough to tell, but I do think like if Doc can't get these guys to play differently or to realize that what they're doing isn't working, I think it's on him.
I would tend to agree. What's strange, and where I think the coaching staff, Doc or whoever else, it doesn't have to just be Doc, he's obviously the head coach, so he's going to take the most responsibility, is the way that the sets that result in isolation looks run. So last night against the Cavs is the perfect example, where you watch the Cavs and they remind you a lot of the Bucks out of the Budenholzer era, because even in isolation look, you're generating so many easy looks for everybody else because of off-ball movements. Guys are getting involved. Like we had the 5-box system early on, and however that morphed, but you knew what the system was going to be, and it emphasized and made it easy for the role players to get involved. Now, when you watch the Bucks, it's a lot of standing around, which has been a problem for a long time, but it seems more pronounced, and it seems even more of guys are lost. Do I need to get involved? Is this just the Dame and Giannis show? I think there are times as well where you run a set play for whomever, it doesn't work, things start getting a little tight, and then Dame and Giannis go, I'm just going to do it myself. or even if they don't want to do it themselves, there's all of a sudden they're like above the elbow, above the break, and nobody's doing anything around them. So then Dame's like, okay, I'll just dribble, move, step back. And it works to a decent enough amount of time where it's like, that's an okay look, but that's not ideal offense. That's not sustainable over 48 minutes or a 7-game series. So I wish the coaching staff would have implemented a better series of base sets to make isolation looks have a secondary option. And on top of that, I do wish the overall system or scheme didn't force it or seem to force it to Dame and Giannis as often as it does. And it's a chicken or egg problem here, which is why the blame ultimately lies with everybody involved. It's just tough to determine where does it start. I think it starts with the coaching staff, quite honestly. I do believe that Doc is okay with letting the guys work not however they want, but mostly how they want, especially because the last guy who tried to pull a power move over the coaches got canned halfway through his first season as an NBA head coach, and he was reviled and hated by everybody on the team. So maybe pragmatically, this is how Doc has to do it. I do think he is temperamentally like that as well, but it's this interesting confluence of events over the past 2 years that results in an offense that I looked beforehand, 113.8 offensive rating. That's 14th in the league, just above average. And yet it's almost amazing that the offense is that good, given the fact that they do ISO so often, that there are so many different play types where it's good, but they're not really, they're extremely effective in ISO, and the other ones not so much. So it's amazing the fact that the ISO is as good as it is to power that. But there's just a lot of concerns there. We've switched now, ironically, where before I was like, the defense is the problem. Well, the more I watch, the more I wonder, is the offense now becoming the problem? And is that something that they can solve for in the playoffs?
Yeah, and a couple points. It's a good point about the guys like, they give it to, let's say it's Gary Trent, and he's not the greatest at like whipping around a screen and getting into the teeth of the defense, and nor is AJ Green. And then you've got like Kuz, and what's his game and what's his role on this team. And so so there are other factors kind of contributing to this, like we were talking about it on the playback stream yesterday, but I don't know if it's just me. Maybe other people would see this differently. Maybe I'm seeing things, but I feel like Brook has looked just particularly just slow this last week or so. Like some of these games, I'm just like, just the reaction time and that sort of stuff seems a bit slow. And I mean, part of me is also like the players need to be sort of coaches on the floor, like who are, I think I sorry, I was doing the stream when I was watching the Orlando game. I was like, I noticed one thing is that everything was so damn slow, and I realized like what was happening was that Orlando was switching basically everything. And so my thinking was, they had like, I don't know if this was the initial matchup, but they seemed to have like a big guy on Dame and a big guy on Giannis, and those two would screen, and then they would just switch and they'd throw it down to Giannis, and he's being guarded by like Franz Wagner or something. And so part of me was like, all right, how do we solve this? And I'm thinking like, all right, well, who's guarding AJ Green? Because that's bound to be like Cole Anthony or someone like that. And so can AJ Green, like, can they reach a new, like, can they get the extra layer of, okay, AJ Green go screen for Cole, get Cole switched on to go screen Dame with Cole as a person who's guarding you, get Cole switched on to Dame, and then go into a Dame Giannis pick and roll, and now Cole is going to be guarding Giannis. And so those little like details, that there's just that layer that seems to be missing, that layer of connectedness, that it's like, okay, like we need to diagnose why this offense is so in the mud right now. And to the Magic's credit, I thought they made every tough shot in that game. And it was like, holy, like they just didn't stop missing, and they got a whole bunch of like lucky rolls and stuff. But I do think there's like a layer of connectedness that like you watch Cleveland and you watch, I mean, really Cleveland. I think Boston can get caught in ISO land as well when you watch them. But I was watching Cleveland and I'm like, these guys are like selfless and they really are playing for each other in a way that I really don't think I've seen a team do this season. It just jumped off the page at like how connected they seemed on the court, and the Bucks kind of were nowhere near that level, sort of. And every shot they took was like so hard to get, and every shot Cleveland took was like, it was like a breeze, you know.
Mm-hmm. It's strange because the Bucks will have stretches where it looks very promising. Yesterday, first quarter, teams were throwing punches back and forth, defense optional. However, all sorts of Bucks are getting involved, shooting, scoring, getting good looks, not having to work too hard. And there were a number of opportunities the Bucks shooters had from three that they just didn't make. Like Gary Trent Jr. wide open a couple of times, just didn't drop. It happens. But it was very interesting. You pointed out last night to me, and this is so true now that you think about it. Small stuff like Brook bringing his defender out to Giannis with not a lot of time left, or to Dame, there's not a lot of time left on the shot clock, or Brook has the more difficult defensive matchup. Pull that guy away from wherever the point of action is going, especially wherever the point of action is going to be, especially late in the shot clock. And the difference between the Celtics, who do run ISO more than the Bucks, that want to say they're second in the league, the difference is it's a lot more purposeful, and it seems to be completely geared around we're just hunting that mismatch. Once we get the mismatch, now we're going into ISO, and you can criticize it. You can wonder how effective or how sustainable that is. But even another team that runs ISO just about as much as Milwaukee does it more intelligently, does it more with more persistence, more I don't know, attention to detail. And that's what's strange about it. And there are going to be good defensive teams like the Celtics where it's tough for a team like the Bucks to find that mismatch. But when the Bucks go up against a Cleveland who have a great defense, but there are stretches where Dean Wade is the main defender on Giannis. And for some reason, the team just goes away from Giannis with the game on the line with Dean Wade guarding him. Why aren't we utilizing that? Why is Giannis spending so much time and effort going up against Jared Allen and wasting offensive possessions rather than now this is the time to pick your spots? So you're so right about it too being on the players to be coaches on the floor. And this is an old team. Kyle Kuzma is also, I was going to say younger. He's my age. He's 30, or he's going to be 30. The only young guys who are out there are Gary Trent Jr., young. He's 27, I want to say, 27, 28. AJ Green and Kevin Porter Jr. Like Kevin Porter Jr., Sims, Kuzma doesn't count again. So just a couple of the guys in the rotation are young. Everybody else, like Dame, needs to know. And I think Dame typically knows, but he's just not getting the assistance from others. And I don't know if he's reticent or he's quiet on the court when it comes to directing traffic to make it happen. It's all very, I think we're diagnosing the right problem. It's just so many questions on how you fix it that it's hard to pick out what the right thing is. But that you can tell qualitatively it's different the way the Bucks do it versus the other top teams in the league do it.
Yeah. I wrote about, like, my mind was racing, and I'm like, I have to put these thoughts on paper after the game last night. I wrote a thing in for Brewhoop today about this game, and one note I had from the game was like, that the Bucks seem to struggle with is physicality, and like teams that like grab and hold and push and make everything hard, and they're guarding 94 feet. This was like the Pacers. Now it didn't help that the Bucks didn't have Giannis at the end in the playoffs last season, but like the Pacers did this and completely got the Bucks out of sorts just with crazy sort of physicality at the point of attack and dudes coming off screens. And when that happens, the Bucks just curl up into a fetal position sort of thing and go inwards. And that's exactly what the that's exactly what the other team wants you to do. And it's like, no, you have to like accept the challenge. Yeah, someone's going to run right into your sternum on this screen and they're going to try and run through you, but no, you got to put them on the ground. You know, your screen has to be more physical than their kind of guarding the on-ball player. And like, okay, they come to double and they're like really quick and aggressive with it. Well, you got to be more alert and get that ball out real quick and kind of what's the word, like equal the intensity that the
You
other
got to match
team.
them. You have to match them.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I feel like the Bucks have shown that they don't do that well enough.
They don't respond to that well enough. And realistically, the way I'm looking at the team now, they have to follow almost the exact same blueprint as they did for their last title to, if they have a shot at winning a title here, which is be an excellent defense. Match that. They have to be the physical defense and just pray you get enough through those isolation looks more or less to make it happen. And I don't see the intensity. I don't know who that intensity is going to come from defensively. I think the team defense looks better. It's verifiably better. They're top 10 now on the season. They have a 111.8 defense on the year, which is 9th in the league. Every time you talk about contenders, you say you have to be top 10 in offense and defense. The Bucks have gotten there on defense, which is a miracle because it looked highly unlikely earlier this season. So I want to give them credit there. But I just wonder when the playoffs show up, is there enough offense here, even with the disconnectedness, even with the number of times they run ISO, even with how bad of a whistle they get relative to expectations, for them to do enough to win? I think so. Last night, for example, which was not a great night for the Bucks, they still held the Cavs starters to about 100 points.
Yes.
Now, it's 100 points through 4.5 quarters or so. So there still was a little bit of time if it was more competitive, but the team still held the Cavs to 100 points. And if Trent or Green hit a couple more threes, okay, you're in the mix. I think they can do enough on both ends. It's just I'm just curious if they can do it over the course of a series. So I don't want people to listen to this and say, oh, Jack and Riley are huge effing haters. Why do you tune in? You don't like the team. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that there's still a way through. It's just against the top competition and against the Cavs last night, which was on a back-to-back. There's signs that you say there's something here, but they just still haven't put it all together against the top teams. And I think a lot of what we're talking about is tied into that.
Yeah, and yeah, I totally agree. I mean, Giannis is the ultimate trump card in this scenario. Like
Yep.
we have, like, he's going to be the best player in every series, and like I wrote that in my story that like him being the best player in the series gives you hope at the very least, like gives you a shot, and then you kind of just have to iron the sort of edges out of that strategy. But yeah, it's just can it come together with the other guys? Obviously, like, yeah, my thing is I just want them to fire their best shot. Like if we do these things and we try and we try this strategy and we execute it to the best of our abilities and it doesn't work, fine. Like I'm happy with that. But you just like, you don't want them to go in with a strategy against these teams that doesn't work, and then it doesn't work and you're like, why did we try that? And it's like, that's the whole thing, is like, I just want to know that like when and if we play these teams in the second round conference finals, God willing, I want to know that we tried a strategy, we maybe change course from how we played in the regular season, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe Giannis is so good that it just carries us over the top. Dame can be the second or third best player in a series, and that's where the optimism comes from. And I never want to sound negative on the team, because I am I always try and keep hope for my own sanity that they can still win, because why are we doing this if they can't still win? But
yep.
yeah, it's just about kind of putting those pieces together. And I do think they need to use the rest of the regular season. And indeed, this stretch coming up where they're going to play like a bazillion above 500 teams, that they really make a point of like, we're going to play more together. We're going to like play for each other, and we're going to see where it takes us, basically.
Speaking of the upcoming stretch, let's talk about the 5 guys who are going to get us there, take us to the promised land, if Doc's recent history is his near future. So the 5-man starting lineup, which switched. Do you remember what precipitated the switch to Taurean Prince going in the? Is it Bobby being out? That would be the switch, right?
I'm not sure. I actually can't remember really. What was the
initiating, what
Taurean,
made it happen?
Yeah, was it?
So
always...
Taurean's been there the entire time. Ajax
Right, yeah.
got swapped out after the All-Star break
Oh
because
yes, yeah.
Andre was injured, much like Lauri Markkanen. If you needed him at a moment's notice, he could definitely play. But Ajax was injured, so that gave Doc the perfect excuse to. And it's so funny. NBA coaches, they have to wait for this arbitrary like cover. Like, hey, just go tell the young guy, hey, you suck. You've not been playing well. Sorry, but you lost your starter job. Like somebody else, Kyle Kuzma's going to have a bigger role than you. Sorry, that's just the reality of it, but whatever. So the men who have led us to, I believe now at this point, it's a 7-3 record over the last 10. And they've played in 9 games together. The starting lineup of Damian Lillard, Taurean Prince, who I'm sure and he signed on the dotted line, did not expect he would be the starting 2 guard at age whatever it is, 33 in the year 2025, but he's the 2 guard. Kyle Kuzma, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Brook Lopez. So 9 games, they played 131 minutes. That makes it the 3rd most used starting lineup of the year. The other iterations being that early season, Gary Trent Jr. and Taurean Prince at the 2 and 3 spots. And then that long stretch where it was Ajax and Taurean Prince at the 2 and 3 spots. So this is the 3rd most prolific. It's got not that many more games or minutes until it eclipses the Ajax lineup. But so far, 115.5 offensive rating, 108.8 defensive rating. That means it's plus 6.7 net. So that means it is better on both offense and defense than the team has been over the season. Warning, warning, warning. Small sample size relative to the course of an entire season. Why I bring this up. So last night you said there's clearly a tier of where there's the contenders, probably the top 2 in the East, and then everybody else. And that's very obvious for the Bucks. I am now at the point where in the season where I'm wondering, like I said last week, what rotation changes can happen, what can be adjusted. Obviously, Bobby Portis will come back with about 5 games left in the season. Not a huge runway, but it is a runway to get him integrated again. And looking at the starting lineup and then looking at the rotation and figuring out what are some changes that I would make the case for, and am I even right to make the case for it? So what I learned is that starting lineup is better than I figured, but that they've also been playing some relatively bad teams in that stretch or subpar teams. And so I'm still at a loss whether or not they're for real, whether or not it's not fake, but not sustainable. And I just don't know the answer to that question. I believe we will learn a lot more over even this week, like just this week, about how sustainable this group is. I had concerns about Prince being the starting 2, but your ball knowledge on display last night. And if you are a religious watcher of playback.tv/Brewhoop, folks, you will hear this ball knowledge live. Taurean Prince may not have the speed to stay in front of his guard assignments, but he has the length and he has the strength and he has the know-how to push him, whoever his assignment is, in the right direction for the team defense to step in and help out. So last night, Darius Garland was Prince's assignment. And Garland, I don't even have his stats up. I don't recall him having an astounding game. Now you're going to pull up the numbers and he will have shot 10 for 13.
No, you're right. 4 for 13, 1 for 8 from 3.
So, and one of those shots, one of those 4 was a completely blown play because Brook and Giannis had their backs turned completely and Prince was left on an island and had no way. But I guess at this point, you let it ride because if the defense holds up, Prince is shooting again, has cooled off relative to the seasons, but still, I'd say he's a reliable 3-point shooter. He spaces the floor. Brooks spaces the floor. Kuz adds a little bit of crazy, sometimes good, usually last night bad. The assist turnover ratio has now gone negative, which is not good. But I think what I learned is I'm going to give this starting group my endorsement, the seal of approval for now, against all odds. Now I know friend of the pod, and by friend I mean regular co-host Kyle and friend of the pod Morgan, both gave the old thumbs down to Taurean Prince at the starting 2 position. Understandably so. I understand why you would be concerned about that, but would you say you feel good about the starting lineup? Like, let's start with the starting lineup and then we'll work our way through the rotation if there are any other changes you could envision or you would want to make. How do you feel about this starting 5?
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, like obviously, I mean, the only spot that I'm thinking about, some people have thrown out like, can they bring Kuz off the bench? And like to me, that just doesn't feel realistic. I mean, just politically, what, yeah, whatever that's worth. But I'm looking at Taurean Prince, and like you said, I mean, it doesn't feel like it should work because we heard from the Lakers people at Silver Screen and Roll that he's not really a guard defender, and he's really is a wing. Like he's okay on wings, but like those small little zippy guards, not great. And one of the first games we saw him was in that Miami game, and Tyler Hero really did kind of cook him, and it was like, ooh, okay. So they're gonna have to make some adjustments here, and everyone was like, all right, myself included, was like, okay, this is not viable. And then they played. It was obviously the Mavericks and the Hawks, and they had Irving and Trae Young, and he was defending both of them. And like with Irving, it wasn't like it was like you said. I'm watching the game, and I'm like, he's not like like making Kyrie like change directions and stuff like that, but he is funneling him into the correct spots, and it helped that like the Lively wasn't there, and obviously AD wasn't playing and stuff, so they could really be a bit higher on those screen and rolls with the dropping big, and so you could really crowd Irving and whatnot a little bit more. But I thought he did a good job on Trae Young, pushing him to the right spots, and it could be like we get to the postseason and it's like, oh, we were all like, we were right at the start, like he can't do this, but there really isn't like, like I think most people would say the alternative would be AJ Green or Gary Trent, and they probably do have a little bit better foot speed, but maybe Torian's length is sort of canceling that foot speed out a little bit more. So maybe I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter too much. Early in the season, I was like, they need to stick with Ajax, because in terms of like the prototype of, like, I don't know if this is too in the weeds, but like the body type of the guys you want guarding these guys, it's generally like you look around the NBA and it's number one quick, but generally they're like wiry, quick guys. Like you look at Minnesota has Nickeil Alexander-Walker, like, you go across the league, like in one of the 2 guard spots, it's generally a guy like this. Miami, Davion Mitchell, New York, like Deuce McBride, Josh Hart, etc. But like, I'm just like, who is that guy for the Bucks? And they didn't really have it other than Ajax. And then it's like we started getting to the point where, number one, like his defense wasn't as good, but it wasn't even really like ability based. It was more like his like I said, he was getting too excited, like guarding these guys. Like he's getting too kind of up and in, and he's fouling too much, and he just looked like a bit of a
it
deer
looked
in the
like he was
headlights.
doing stuff. Like you would see, like, oh, he's doing stuff. And when
Yeah,
you're somebody at home, you're like, Jesus, please, somebody do something. We're getting sliced to death right now. And then Ajax would do stuff. He'd foul a million times or get blown by, and the defense got substantially worse as the stretch
yeah.
went along with him as a starter, oddly enough.
And then
But yeah,
and then it just got to a point where you're just like, okay, like I'll take the mulligan on that. Like this is not gonna work. But yeah, it's I can't really fault the fact that they're starting Torian too badly. maybe they make the switch to AJ or Gary Trent at some point. But like, yeah, I'm fine with them rolling for it for the time being, certainly.
I think we're stuck with it regardless because I can't see on the horizon what phantom injury gives Doc the cover to switch it up. And this is a classic Doc lineup because it's mostly vets and then Kuzma. So he gets to keep Dame happy. Well, obviously Damian Giannis and Brook in permanent marker starters. Then Taurean Prince, who is a vet, you keep him happy. He gets to continue to be a starter, even if he has to guard guys that are half his size and run around a lot. And then Kuzma, okay, he's the new guy. Throw him in there. That's fine. Like, this is good for Doc because he gets to keep everybody happy. And to be honest, I mean, I'm sure if I pulled up his numbers, but Gary Trent's defensive numbers were just not good. His on-off defensive numbers. And I lost faith very early on in his defense, which feels very mandatory to me. And you said last night, and I think it's true over the course of the season, he's gambling a lot more rather than staying.
Last night,
he's gambling more than trying to stay home and force a ball handler into the right direction for the team defense, which is just the opposite of what you need. If you're Malik Beasley and you literally just have no ability to defend at all, sure, go ahead and gamble. I thought Trent was going to bring more, and I don't think he has. And then Green, and people know my grievances with Green. Again, sorry, Kyle, but he's just not a great perimeter defender. He's in the paint. Oh, my God. I'll take, it'll be Giannis, Brook, and then Green will be number 3 in terms of guys I want defending in the paint. But on the perimeter, I worry about that. And what the key for the Bucks defensively is not anything in particular outside of how can you hide Dame? And somehow, some way, if Taurean Prince is able to hide Dame so that he's not having to guard the Darius Garlands of the world or the Trae Youngs of the world, then that's a success. Even if you are watching, you're like, oh, this guy got past Taurean. Well, no, that's okay because Taurean can keep a hip on him. He can keep contact, and it'll work into the team defense exactly as you want. So it's not the starting lineup I thought the team would come upon earlier in the season, but I also don't see the point at which it will change. And I'm not sure right now, numbers wise, there is a reason for it to change. It's the best defense of the 3 main starting groups we've seen so far, second best offense. If it gets into that 108.8, I believe that would be best in the league if it was over the course of the season. Again, warning, small sample size, but the defense numbers have been good. It will learn a lot more over the next coming week or two if it's going to be sustainable against better competition.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. No notes for that.
All right. Any other thoughts on the team? Anything else you learned this past week about them? Don't you wish you could play the Dallas Mavericks every night? Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah. I mean, do we have KPJ thoughts? I mean,
it's okay. That's actually another interesting question. So rotation wise, I think I've come to accept that Doc, for some reason, will not adhere to the principle of you don't have a single competitive minute where at least one of Dame or Giannis are on the floor.
Yeah.
For some reason, we still have stretches where one of them are off the floor. And the Bucks, they blew it at the start of the second quarter yesterday against the Cavs because of that non-2-star lineup. So the issue with KPJ, one of the limitations of KPJ is that the Dame fit isn't perfect, but I think he's okay next to Giannis. So I think of Giannis lineups. If Dame is off the floor, have Porter Jr. out there. Okay, that makes sense. I'm trying to think of if Giannis is off the floor, who the running mates around a Dame lineup is that doesn't just become even more bogged down, ISO heavy, Dame do everything for us. And I'm just not sure what the fit there. So I think part of what the rest of the season will be, and it could just be Bobby Portis comes back and he'll just be the solution. Sims does not do a lot besides roll really hard to the rim. So maybe you swap Sims for Bobby, and Bobby does enough offensively that it just solves the Dame solo lineups on its own. But when you think about throwing Sims out there and then you kind of go down from there, it's like, okay, who's the next guy up next to Dame? It's Kuzma. Kyle Kuzma's going to go do some crazy shit out there, and we just hope it's a good night for him. AJ Green doesn't do a lot himself. Gary Trent tries occasionally, not amazing at making his own shot off the dribble. Prince will drive like 5 times a game for some reason. Sometimes it gets tripped like 50% of the time. I just think of what the ideal group around Dame is, and it's probably just has to have Bobby, right? Is there any other formulation you can think of with the rest of the roster where Giannis is off the floor and a Dame lineup is like really effective?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Like I mean, the one thing that is interesting and is like people. It feels like over the last 2 games, starting with the Dallas game, they will, and obviously there was injuries for that one. With I believe Trent didn't play and stuff, but like it's like it feels like Doc's kind of trying to experiment with. Okay, we've been giving KPJ 15 minutes per game, and he's clearly like producing in those 15 minutes. Like, are we overthinking this? Just not putting him on the court for 20 to 25, and they've been kind of going with a few of these Dame. They've been like it'll be like at the end of Dame's shifts, at the end of Dame's shift, at the start of KPJ's shift, they're trying to like possibly morph them, not morph them, but like pair them a little bit together. And I posited on the playback stream yesterday, like maybe what they do is because I was looking at Dame's workload trying to get shots against that rugged Cavs defense, and it's like maybe you throw him out there and you use him as an off-ball player, as a decoy for KPJ to work in the pick and roll, and I thought he did pretty good in. I'm not sure how many points did he have. What did he have? He had. Oh, I know he had just 2 points. Maybe, am I looking at the right game? Yeah, just 2 points. So, yeah, that.
I like the thrust of what you're saying, because
yeah,
part of it too is for a player like Kevin Porter Jr., if you're going to be the kind of guy that you can't coexist on the floor with a Damian Lillard and be effective,
it's tough.
There's only so many teams that are going to be willing to pay you an F load of money to essentially do what he did with the really crappy Cavs 4 years ago and then the somewhat crappy Rockets, which is, hey, have fun out there. Like, there's plenty of shots to go around. And there are teams that will tank and just let him do that. But if he has intentions, like most players I would hope, of being paid a good amount of money and also being on a competitive team, you have to be able to push him into that lineup where, no, he's not going to initiate every single time. Like, when Dame's off the floor and it's him, okay, that's fine if he wants to initiate a lot of the offense. That's what he's out there for. But it's part of forcing a player to grow a little bit. And I think that's the right idea stylistically that you're saying is have him out there. He will help draw attention. He's probably one of the better dribblers on the team, especially among the guard core when it comes to the guys coming off the bench. If he's just a decoy or even occasional, like, let him start it, let Dame be they don't really use Dame as a decoy nearly as much as I thought they would. I think that's just getting him rest on the court. I like the thrust of it. And maybe, like you're saying, now it's just the early end of the experimentation and they'll try it a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and it'll come together. But I think that's a possible combo. And that would be great because then Porter can fit with both Giannis and Dame lineups. And that's your bridge guy. He's one of your bridge guys.
Yeah. I do want to give KPJ credit. Like, we've been giving him a lot of credit on the site with our game coverage and stuff of like, he has saved their bacon, like, I want to say at least 3 times now. And it feels like highway robbery every time it happens. You're just
if it had been one game, you'd say that was highway robbery. The fact that it happened in multiple, you're like, oh my god,
you're
we're
like,
in the money.
Like I mean, like in the Hawks game, it's just like you're just like, oh man, they're down by like 6 points and they're entering the stretch at the start of the fourth with no Dame or Giannis, and they have to survive 4 minutes and they have the lead when those guys come in. KPJ goes on his own, like scores 12 points in a matter of like 6 minutes.
Yep.
And so I really want to give him his flowers for that. And then it's just like, okay, like, can he sort of, and I do think in the playoffs, like, there's some people like, I think there was a clip of like the Hoop Collective saying like he won't do a damn thing in the playoffs. That was going viral on Bucks Twitter. So, but you know, whether that's true or not is just like, I do think the increased physicality in the playoffs and like a bit like, I do think that like there's a decent chance that like guys like AJ Green and Gary Trent, maybe those guys become uh, ineffective, and you really are going to need a guy who can, you know, come off the pick and roll and get the guy on his back and get to that step back, and just that little kind of like herky jerky style might actually be more amenable to what the Bucks need in those, like, you know, those few minutes when Dame is not playing, or Dame is, like we talked about before, the decoy, and you're using him in that role. I do think like the playoff Warriors might go, it might go horribly, but it might go the complete opposite way, where you're like, oh, we actually really need this guy to give us like at least 15 minutes a game in the playoffs.
I think this is so stupid, because right now the Bucks aren't even in tier 1 of contendership, much less like really strongly in tier 2. I think they're somewhat in tier 2 maybe, and very comfortably in tier 3. So for this team, finding out the right balance of minutes between Gary Trent Jr., AJ Green, and Kevin Porter Jr. is going to be massive for the direction that they go. And part of it will be, like you said, riding the hot hand. Part of it will be matchup dependent. I look at the minute distribution last night. It was a 9-man rotation. The starters that we already talked about. Trent plays about 20 minutes. Green plays about 20 minutes. Jericho Sims plays about 18 minutes. And Porter Jr. only 10 minutes. There's going to be a consolidation there. So all those Sims minutes are going to go to Bobby. I think the odds of Sims still having a role, right or wrong, depending on, some people I'm sure really like him. I'm not on social media, so I don't really know. But if you're a big Sims person, let me just tell you right now, the second Bobby is back, you will never see Jericho Sims again. It's not going to happen.
It's tough to hear, but it's true.
It's true. So, and I mean, we know Doc, it's just, that's how it's going to go. So 18, let's say 20-ish minutes goes to Bobby. That brings you, that's still a 9-man rotation. We always talk about what that 8-man rotation exercise is. Who do you eliminate out of the 3 guards to get you down to that 8-man group? If it's like do or die, these are my 8 guys. It's the 5 starters for sure. It's Bobby for sure. And then it's one of Gary Trent, AJ, or Kevin. And that's going to be really hard for the team to sort out. And whoever you are at home listening, pick your 2 favorite guys, and there's going to be a very viable case for that third guy. It's a good problem to have playable options, but then it's also a tough problem, because do you stick with the guy too long? Did you make the wrong choice in putting AJ Green, thinking we need his shooting and he's better and his perimeter defense doesn't hold up? So I just wonder, if I was to make a bet, I would... Kyle will hate me for this. I would think that Green would fall out, and I don't know. It's so tough. Like, you can catch me any single game.
It's scenario based, and like I think they'll all get a shot. Obviously, you don't really have time on your side in a playoff series. But I think like if they're struggling to generate offense, you can bet your bottom dollar Doc's going to throw KPJ in there as like a firework that may blow us up or blow them up. One of the two.
It's that really fine balance, because like Trent last night goes 1 of 9 from the field. Okay, if he's started a game 1 for 5, do we stick with it to see if he sorts it out? Or is Doc gonna be decisive and be like, look, brother, you don't got it, so sorry, but you're riding behind the rest of the game, and maybe we'll try it again next game. You're so right that it's situation dependent. It will be game dependent. I just don't want to be here in 2.5 months being like, man, if only they had tried XYZ or didn't stick with X guy too long and it wasn't working out. And it was obvious to all of us at home, but we then got to game 3, game 4, and we were still trying to make it work, and it just wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And that's a debate that we will have later in the season, I'm sure. So, it's an interesting spot to be. I think there's a lot of interesting questions about the team. I think it's more entertaining still to watch now than it was early in the season. I still enjoy like the possession, even if it's a little crazy, but I feel like that was a good discussion. Any final points on the team before we go on?
Yeah, I'll just say on that one, I do think for better or for worse, I do think the Chris trade is crystallize some stuff. Like Kuz is going to play how many minutes did Kuz play? So
32
Kuz played
last
31,
night.
but it feels like he's been above 35 in like every game.
Yep.
I think you mentioned on your last podcast with Adam and Kyle that he's averaging the most minutes on the team, or maybe it was Adam that mentioned that. I can't remember, but so obviously like Kuz he's gonna play a lot of minutes, mainly because of what he can give defensively. I think that's been a real feather in their cap. It's just like they have Giannis and Dame, and then it's like there is no third option. It's like Giannis and Dame, and then Kuz is like a distant fifth, and then everyone else is 5A, 5B, 5C, and it's just like
It's true.
maybe Kuz isn't even 5A. I don't know, but like at least like for better or for worse, they know that like that third option is not coming in to save the day. And it's like that's going to be a by committee thing, and it's going to be KPJ, and it's going to be like, can Kuz play out of some mismatches and stuff. That's one thing that you do worry about with Kuz against like teams with excellent defenses is like, can he find, like in the Hawks, there's a few guys he could attack that made sense, and like with the Cavs, it's like, okay, is he just like a spot up shooter against these guys? I mean, you could probably go at like Darius Garland maybe, but I don't know. I didn't notice him being too bad defensively. So just about, this is what we got for this season, and it's like we got to make do with what we have, really.
It should focus minds. It's that much more incumbent upon the coaching staff and the team to sort it out, because it's one thing to say, oh, well, Chris can go out there and save us with some tough shots, which he would, but you don't have that anymore. So make something happen. You got to make lemonade out of lemons. Life gives you lemons. Life gives you Kyle Kuzma. Use the fact that Kyle Kuzma can cut and spot up a little bit, even though the percentages aren't amazing, to make something happen. So he did not shoot a single three last night. That's strange. Okay. But yes, I agree. It ends that ties from the front all the way back through. I think that's, the isolation stuff is one thing. You have to work out a system. You have to get the rest of these guys involved, because they're all fifth options, and you got to make something happen with the fifth option. So good luck, Doc. Good luck, team. All right. With that, we'll reach the end of our Bucks discussion. Not fully. We're going to go to rapid fire questions as the next in the miscellaneous segments. 4 questions for you tonight, Jack. All of them basketball related for the first time in a long time. First question: who is the next great Australian basketball hope? So in the States, it's always whatever American is vying to be the number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft. And this year it's Cooper Flagg. I'm trying to remember who Zion was the guy before him. I'm trying to think if there was anybody between those two as like the great American hope. But who's the next great Australian hope in basketball?
There really isn't like that on-ball guy coming through the system. You could say Josh Giddey. Josh Giddey stocks were at an all-time low at the end of last season.
You could get him for pennies. You could get penny stocks.
And then they basically did, because they traded him for like Alex Caruso, and everyone panned that trade at the time, saying that was a horrible trade. And it may sort of on aggregate be a bad trade, because they're going to have to give Josh Giddey a massive bag this offseason. And and is that a guy you really want to be like investing large sums of money in? I mean, you're probably not going like to the promised land with him as like a top 3 guy, as much as I love Josh, not trying to hate on him, but recently he's been putting up some pretty dang good numbers for the Chicago Bulls. Shout out to our guy Jackson Gross, who'll be on that. But so I would say he's, I guess, at the top of the pecking order right now. And then you've got Dyson Daniels, who is obviously like defensive player of the year candidate this year. I mean, all the Aussie people are saying like, you got to give it to this guy now that Wemby's injured and stuff. But he's the other guy where it's like, I was watching their game, and I don't know who was on playback with me. It might have been, me and Morgan were on, and we're just like, this guy like he's like sort of improved his jump shot. I'm not sure what the stats say, but it seems like lately he's been hitting some of those threes, which is always his knock on him. But he kind of has these herky jerky little janky floaters that he keeps hitting, and I was like, damn, how does he keep doing these little floater things? So I would say those two, but I guess I'd pick Josh Giddey. Yeah, I wanted to mention Ben Simmons, but I don't know if he hasn't played in an
It's
international
over.
tournament for
It's
Australia
over. It's
in
over.
a long time. So I would not, and he's probably not next up as the question sort of asks. But yeah, let's go Josh Giddey.
I like Daniels because he's so excellent on defense, and everybody loves a good defensive player.
Yep.
Like if you're a great defensive player, you will have a lot of fans. He's also, it looks like he was the youngest player on the Summer Olympic roster for you guys. So between him and Giddey, it's like 1 and 2.
Yeah, in that tournament, it was like, oh, Dyson, he's going to be a guy for us.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Okay, I like that. And there's nobody in like tearing it up in the NBL or who's going to make the jump to the NCAA who's super promising. I think Dyson Daniels, he was an Ignite guy, right? He went to okay, yeah.
Yeah.
RIP Ignite. RIP.
Yeah, rest in peace. Yeah, from the guys in the NBL Next Stars program, they're all like sort of second round guys this year, so there's no real awesome prospects there. Dash Daniels, I will give a mention to Dash Daniels. It's Dyson's little brother. He is going to be a next star for Melbourne United next season, and he is like, I'm not a draft guy, but I hear that he's sort of in that lottery conversation for next year already. So special mention to him.
Okay. I love it. I'm on NBADraftRoom.com on my work laptop, which is almost certainly a mistake and is sending all sorts of viruses onto my system. So sorry about that work. Okay, Dash Daniels. Keep an eye out, folks. Future Buck? We'll find out soon. All right, next question. If the top 3 in the East holds as it is, which is Cleveland 1, Boston 2, Knicks 3, what seed would you prefer Milwaukee get to? I.e., this is a question, in what order do you want to face those teams? Do you want them to, like, if they went to 6th and then they have to march through New York and Boston and then Cleveland in that order, presumably, if the series works out, would you want them to go 4th, have the first round series against the Pacers or the Pistons? Like, which essentially, do you want to deal with them right away, or do you want to have a series, at least get potentially that series win to say, hey, we did it, and then do what happens whatever in the second round?
Yeah. Oh my God, this is like the impossible question, because every time I feel like every time you play any of those teams, like the Bucks play any of those teams, you're like, oh, we don't want to face this team. And then you go to the other team, it's like, oh no way we want to play this team. And oh man, if you asked me before yesterday, I would have said finish 4th, hopefully beat Indiana or Detroit or whoever ends up in the 4-5, and then play Cleveland in the second round, but just purely because they're not experienced. Part of me thinks, like, do they want to play Boston just because I feel like Boston, like the Bucks always seem to play Boston okay, mainly because they have a lot of they attack a lot through isolation, as we talked about, and it's just like they kind of they play like an easier way for us to guard, like our personnel to guard. So honestly, part of me thinks Boston, but I don't know. I'll stick with Cleveland in the second round, and then I don't know, we take our shot, but it feels futile.
I'm of two minds, because I kind of like, okay, if it's not going to work against the top tier, let's say the Bucks fall to 6th. And the way I would say that is not that the team sucks. Like, hopefully it doesn't happen that the team just really blows a gasket and that's it. But more so in the interest of trying to cushion Giannis and Dame's workload. Maybe there's just like some minute allocation. You're just trying to get to the playoffs healthy. And as a result, in a very crowded 4 through 6, the Bucks end up 6th. Okay. if the team is going to be not good enough to even get past the 3 seed in the East, I'd rather know that right away, and then we'll be able to index that and make large decisions about the roster makeup in the offseason accordingly. So I'm almost kind of like go the toughest route, because do I feel amazing if they, let's say they beat the Pacers or Pistons in a 6-game series. Let's say it's like a not gentleman sweep, but like six game series.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we made it through the first round, and then you get gentleman swept against the Cavs. What does that tell me? I'm just going to be here on this podcast in 2 months being like, well, I don't know. They were like, if this went this way, or if that went that way, or maybe rather than you can't even get past the Knicks, who with Brunson out, or even with all their issues, are, I think, pretty like deservedly the 3rd seed in the East. Like the way that it's structured right now feels right. If you can't even get past them, let's just know that. Like I would just rather just know that. So I kind of almost think 6th, but obviously I'll accept whatever path they walk down. So
yeah,
not to be a downer, but also no matter what series, like, would you rather any series loss to the Celtics would be annoying because they would just be ISO to death, and to lose to the Celtics would be, of the 3 top teams, easily the most annoying of the 3 to lose to. So, okay. Question number 3, over or under 1.5 on the number of these guys who will be back with the Bucks next season? Taurean Prince, Gary Trent Jr., Kevin Porter Jr. Are you thinking 2 or more will come back, or 2 or fewer will leave, or 2 or more will leave?
Oh,
based on your Hooper knowledge of the free agent markets, and cap space.
Why do I feel I feel confident that it like will get like the most confident in KPJ returning out of those
Interesting.
2.
Okay. Yep.
I don't know. Feels like Gary will want to go for more money, but like, is the money out there for him?
Yeah,
I don't know.
What's his market look like?
Yeah, because it's like, it's not like he's come in here and proved like, oh, he's like a 2-way monster or something, like, and but
that was
I will
the whole
say,
bet. That was the bet.
Yeah, I will say, when Gary's rolling for us, like, I mean, and obviously other teams will be thinking this too, like, he can rip off 6 threes like that, and he's got this really simple shot release, and he just puts them in, and it's like, it is really nice to have. So I'm not trying to like hate on Gary or his game, but he's definitely not like some 2-way monster. But God, I will say over, and I'll go KPJ and TP return.
I think I would agree.
I don't know. I feel like TP's had a good year for us, and like his shooting percentages reflect that. I don't know. Yeah.
He feels, because of his age, it's almost like a Wes Matthews, where you just go season to season. You're like, oh, just stick around.
Yeah.
Like,
I'll come back
the area. Yeah, you get whatever. Like, he's at the age now where he's not going to make a ton of money from anybody else. I don't see like the 2-year, however much contract sitting out there for him. So it just works. He's got a starting spot almost guaranteed. The longest Doc is running things. So
veterans, etc.
Yeah. KPJ is the interesting one, because it felt like for a second, I'm like, oh my God, is he going to play well enough to like reasonably decline his player option and go get not a massive deal, but like a decent deal somewhere? I wonder though if the team, and I said this on last week's podcast, sell him on being like, hey, come back again. You'll be like the first guy off the bench, where you'll have a summer with like a stable organization, summer work, whatever, blah, 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 exercise that player option. And then, you'll have a great season as the 6th man, and you can take the next step in your career. I think they can sell him on that. Although I would understand if his agent thinks there's like a somewhat decent deal out there that he goes for it. Trent, I don't know. Like, he ended up here on the minimum, for God's sake. And I know it was a play to essentially do the Malik Beasley. Seems like it's been less successful than Malik Beasley, but it's also, I don't know. He's just, because he lost the starter job. I'm not really sure what to make of Trent, but I think those 2 is probably about right. I would take the over as well. I think it's Prince and Porter.
Yeah. I will say KPJ's post-game, like, if you were to listen to like what he said about since he's come to Milwaukee, it seems like what you were saying with the whole stable organization. I'm on a winning team. I have sort of a set role. I'm kind of tag teaming with Damian Lillard. Like, This is kind of a role that he hasn't. This is something that he hasn't experienced yet in his NBA career, and he said that he's never been on a winning team. And so I think what you said about the stability of this situation, I think, I don't know, strangely, he feels like the number one guy that's like, okay, like he would be my bet on returning. Maybe TP, but both of them are kind of in the same region for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't envision a world where Porter plays so out of his mind that's like, oh, of course he's going to decline that. I don't think with his history, with the short track record, and again, the fit just doesn't make sense for a lot of teams, I think, with the archetype
other
that he was
teams run
previously.
into the same problem we do. No one's going to hand him the starting point guard spot.
Yes, unless they're looking to just lose their asses off, which there are teams that want to do that. But, at the same time, it's like, well, I could just hire any other number of shitty guards out there to do that for me. Why would I give Kevin Porter Jr.? You got to spend money somewhere, but there's probably more promising guys that you can give money to that will just help you lose your asses off and might have a viable place to like actually be in a rotation in a couple years. So I think those two are good. Final question for you. I called it which deep rotation buck would you most like to see in the NBL? Let's go with this. Let's say veteran, which NBA or Buck veteran, and Giannis and Dame are exempt. You can't pick either of them. Would you most like to see in the NBL? A la Montrezl Harrell. Shows up, balls out of his mind. I mean, I would say Bobby, but Bobby only just turned 30, so he still has a ways before he makes his Australian debut. But like it's pretty much like Prince or Brook at this point. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, Brook.
Pat could do it. Would Pat be a killer? NBL,
yeah, Pat could sell real estate over here. Yeah. Yes. Let me go. I mean, the answer to me is quite obviously Brook Lopez. Like the NBA Australians would love him just for the personality. Like the way, his kind of like dry humor would play very well over here. And I mean, we talk about Brook's positives and negatives, but even on the court, like the thing that helped Montrez, like frankly, Montrez this year. Shout out to you, Montrez, if you're listening. I don't think you are, but
just in case though, you never know. You never know.
He came in. This is no shade, but I think Montrez would admit he came in very out of shape, and even in this league, like he had a really like I think like in the NBA how like Giannis is just so big that it doesn't really matter. Like he just jumps over people.
Yes. Yep.
There was a bit of like that bully ball element to Montrez, and I think, and I say that like he came in out of shape and still dominated, was like a MVP candidate, and I think Brook would be like that on steroids if he wanted to be. I don't think Brook has that. I don't think Brook has that like want to be like a massive, like a dominant offensive guy. But if he wanted to, he could absolutely kill as like a center in the NBL. Like he would destroy people.
That kind of opened up a question. So Chris is no longer with the team. Would Chris dominate? And this is current version Chris. So take that like, could he as a wing, a crafty wing with his skill set still dominate even though he has the physical limitations? Or is it, if you're going to be making the jump from the NBA to the NBL, having the physical gifts is still like the starting point and then you kind of go from there?
I think the latter. But I will say Chris would go just fine in the NBL, like because he again, like it's an undersized league. I think that's the thing that differentiates the NBL from like the Euro League, from what I can understand. It is a undersized league, and like big players just thrive, like big versatile players. And I think Chris on the block being guarded by like 6'2" guys for most of the time, he would kill too.
It's like I'm envisioning small ball 5 Chris and Dash Daniels is guarding him and the world has exploded and and the singularity comes together and the world finally ends. I will, the whatever NBL team executives that I know are listening to this
Isn't
podcast.
Chris? Isn't he a part owner of like some team? I want to say the Brisbane Bullets.
That actually sounds familiar. I'll let you pull that up. I was gonna say,
Yeah,
as you're looking that up, NBL executives, if you're listening and you wanna up that those merch sales, there is no fan base more diehard to a player. Oh, of course there are more diehard, but if you're looking for moderate gettable NBA player who has a diehard fan base, Chris Middleton might be up there. You will sell some jerseys. Like
yeah.
you will be selling jerseys.
He's part of the Brisbane Bullets ownership group.
Okay, so I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds
So
like
there is
the
the link
ownership
there.
rule. Well, it sounds like the ownership rules in the NBL are like a little loosey goosey. So Chris can be a owner player, and that wouldn't phase a single person in the league. So let's make
I'm
it
pretty
happen.
sure Dante. There's a few NBA guys. Not that I mean Dante is Australian, but Dante Exum owns part of Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. I'm pretty sure.
Interesting.
So this is like a thing that players are doing. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure Chris has made more money than God in his life, so I cannot imagine he has any desire to continue the career.
Yeah, come
in
play
Australia.
for like 400K over here, man.
Chris is flying private to every game by himself. he says, you guys are cool and everything, but I'll see you there. I'll catch you. You at the arena.
I ain't flying no economy. No, they do fly economy over here, so
I'm sure they do. That's usually a hard transition for like in soccer when players come to the US. It's like, oh, by the way, you're flying American. You're flying Delta with like the rest of the peasants to Houston or wherever the hell you're going. Okay. That's what I have for rapid fire. That was a good segue into your segment. So this is Tales from Basketball's Outback. The NBL season is over. It's been a bit since we had you on. Obviously we're curious how your team ended up. It sounded dire the last time we had the update, but how did the season work out? Did we bring home silverware or no?
Yeah, unfortunately not, but it did get a lot better. I will say that, Riley. The last time I was on, I believe they were in a pretty bad downward spiral. The very next game after I was on that podcast, they had a quote unquote crisis meeting at their hotel in Sydney. Now, I don't know whether it was just a meeting and the journos, labeled it that, but whatever it is, they had to sort some stuff out. And they came out and smacked the Kings by 20, who were like the third seed. And this is the frustrating thing about the 36ers. They are, I mean, if you ask most people, they'd have like one of the most talented lists in the league. I mean, certainly their top four was very talented. From there, it sort of did fall off a cliff a little bit. But a really talented team. And then I want to say from there, they might have won like the next 3 of 5 or the next 4 of 6 or whatever it was. They ended the season losing their final 3 games, but everyone around them also crumbled. So they kind of fell ass backwards into the final play-in spot. From there, they played the Sydney Kings in the 5-6 play-in game. They won away at Sydney. So they played the loser of the 3-4 play-in game to get the 4th seed, and so they played at Southeast Melbourne, and they hit a half-court shot on the buzzer at halftime to be up 19 points, and then capitulated and lost.
Oh no!
So yeah,
they blew a 20-point lead at the half. Oh yeah, man!
And their thing was like, it was a really funny like the problems with the team were pretty evident. Is they had Kendrick Davis, who just is a dynamo. He was second in the MVP voting, and basically number one, the Phoenix have a terrific defense, and they're really physical, like we were talking about with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Like, they're really physical, and basically they just got under KD's skin so badly, and he had no juice. He played the full 40 minutes. He had no juice in the tank in the second half. He was just worn down, and basically like they had the sort of the problem where, okay, KD's kind of like half doubled, and they kick it to the next guy, and the next guy just could not make a play, couldn't hit a shot, can't like drive the closeout or whatever, and it all just it was funny. Like it was like it didn't all happen at once, but it was like, oh, he's not hitting shots. We're probably done here.
Mm-hmm.
And he just never hit another shot, really. Like he must have gone like 0 for 12, 1 for 12 in the second half, and they lost. And it was funny. Like I was disappointed, but I was not like. It was almost like I knew what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's tough way to end the season. But for an Adelaide fan like me, who they haven't made the playoffs since 2018, I want to say, it was at least nice to be playing relevant games, even if the season was a complete like roller coaster of emotions. So
yeah, it's got to be tough being up about 20 at half and you still lose by 10. I mean, it wasn't even close.
Swing. Yeah,
that's a swing. Are games 40 minutes? Are they 10-minute quarters?
Yeah, 40 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. FIBA rules. Yeah.
And I see here that the finals are still going on. Like they're still happening right now. Is that true?
I think the game 2 for the finals between Melbourne and Illawarra is actually tonight over here. So,
are you the type, will you watch the finals, or once your team is out, it's over?
I will. Yeah, I wasn't watching the semifinals or anything. Like I'll turn them on and see what's happening, but I wasn't following really. I will watch the game in full. Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to the NBL. So is it 10 teams total? How many teams is it?
Oh, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
The fact that you are able to, 10 teams. The fact that you're able to have this playoff bracket, which looks a little convoluted, but I kind of like the system. All things considered, like the couple of play-in, because I think like you said, the 36ers were 13-16 on the season, so they were not even at 500. They were a good bit below 500. They made the playoffs. You get those play-ins. They have to just do or die in that first one, but then I think the 3 and 4 seed, the loser of that gets dropped down the bracket. I think that's interesting, but they're not automatically out off of that one game elimination. So seems interesting to me. I mean, and also I think we should. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, the only bad thing that is everyone's trying to copy the NBA now, and so they want to do an in-season tournament in the NBL too, and it's like, guys, we don't have enough games nor like the infrastructure to copy what the NBA does with the in-season tournament. Like, please stop trying to be the NBA. Like, let's just do the home and away season like we usually do, please.
That's very strange. Why not start with like extending the playoff series a little bit if you're looking for extra games?
Yeah, exactly. They do 3-game playoff series in the first round. So
it's is it a 5-game series for the finals? It looks like.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. In season tournament. Okay, sure. People hate it here. I mean, there's plenty of Bucks fans who hate watched the NBA Cup Finals that the Bucks won. So I can't imagine if you're a fan of an NBA
team. That feels so long ago, doesn't it?
It does, and I sure hope it isn't the highlight of the season. But it was a fun run. One last note here. So the Illawarra Hawks are in the final. Very strange and maybe concerning that AJ Johnson is off the team and they immediately go to the finals and are the number 1 seed overall. So AJ, you got a lot of work to do, but outside, and I haven't seen a highlight of AJ since that dunk in the first game for the Wizards. So I hope he's killing it. And I hope, if I was to vote for a team, I'm going to go for the Hawks, because I have to assume Illawarra it's not even the name of the city, right? Aren't they located?
Oh God, I'm actually not sure. They used to be called Wollongong, and then they changed their name to. I believe the city is called Wollongong. I want to say.
Okay, so it sounds like Nowheresville, Australia to me. So I'm gonna back the little guy, Nowheresville, Australia, over Melbourne, all day.
Kyle knows where it is.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, when next time you're on, you'll have to tell us about how the finals went, and then keep us. I think this is a fun segment. You'll keep us in the loop of who the next NBL next star is, what sort of washed up but not fully washed up NBA player ends up in Adelaide, and we'll go from there. So fun segment.
Just one final note. I will say that the Hawks are coached by Jason Tatum's dad, which is a nice little interesting nugget. Justin Tatum.
I was going to ask, the strength and conditioning coach for Adelaide is Nick Popovich. Any relation? Do we know?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it says
I
that
don't
he's
know that as a
Australian,
fact.
so that would
I
make
will say I
sense.
don't know that as a fact, but I would be very surprised.
How do you feel about Mike Wells? Do you think did he win you over after
Oh
it being a
man,
little bit of a having a
yeah,
crisis meeting is such an American sport thing? It feels like to me.
yeah,
So I'm sure that was precipitated by him.
yeah. I mean, so he was an NBA assistant for 13 years. This is his first year in ever coaching a like a being a head coach, and
Yep.
so I think there's a lot of learning for him. The organization is sticking with him.
Okay. I was gonna ask, is it gonna be
Yeah.
the
So he'll be
Ninnis
the coach next
2.0?
season, and I think
Yeah.
part of that is because they've had like 3 coaches in 3 years, and it would be bad PR for them to move another one.
Mm-hmm.
But Mike Wells, like his thing was like he apparently got in a few arguments with players and heated discussions and stuff. So I think as a tactician he's fine, but his I think his just ability to command a locker room and have the players respect it probably needs maybe a little bit of work. But I'm not in the organization, I don't know, but
It's good. It's giving from a distance. I can judge it because I have no stakes at all. It's giving Adrian Griffin vibes.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah. Yep.
The old my first time coaching a team and I'm going to be confronting the players for some reason. That's a tried and true leadership method, and it's true in that it gets you fired. So shout out to you, Mike. Okay, great. Looking forward to the updates next season. Let's wrap up the podcast. This is a lot of fun. Great discussion. Weekly predictions. 4 games on deck starting today when you're listening to this, Tuesday, at the Pacers in what might be the biggest game of the season if you care about tiebreakers. Then the Bucks are back home for the rest of the week. Thursday against the Lakers, the resurgent Lakers. Saturday, Pacers come into town, and then Sunday against the Thunder. Jack, what say you for the record this week?
Oh man. I am going to go ultra optimistic and go 3-1.
Okay. That's fine. Yeah, go for it.
Your face there is hilarious. Okay, so the Pacers, I don't know. I think they can. So number one with the Pacers, Halliburton has been. I'm not sure. I think might be playing right now, but Halliburton has been out for them, and they have been really bad on offense with him out. So so maybe if he doesn't play, that's a massive feather in the Bucks' cap. They play them twice, so that's 2 wins. With the Lakers, LeBron will be out. I believe Rui is out. I'm not sure if Jackson Hayes is out, but they all sat in his last game. So obviously the Lakers don't have D'Lo to break our hearts again. So I think this is mainly just because of the injuries or possible absences of players. I'm not trying to be like crazy optimistic, but I do think that like if Halliburton doesn't play and LeBron doesn't play, I would tip the Bucks in all 3 of those games. And then with OKC, I mean, they're tough,
Back to back, even a home game. It's going to be
maybe that's a rest game for our guys.
I was going to say, if I was to, it will be pulling what we did on the road in OKC, where it's like, hey, Chris Livingston, hope you're ready because you're about to be playing 38 minutes tonight. on a Sunday. I didn't even see if it was a matinee game on Sunday. But knowing the league's luck, it'll be like a national game, and the Bucks will sit everybody, and it'll just be a horrible performance for entertainment purposes. Yeah, if you want to look that up. While you look that up, I'm going to go 3-1 as well. You made a good case. I too think that the Bucks will hopefully have the Pacers
OKC
number.
game is on ESPN. Sorry to interrupt you there.
No, you're good.
It's on ESPN, the OKC game. So
Adam Silver, if you're listening, and I know you are, you flex that game. Find literally any other game because the Bucks are not going to try, and you are going to disappoint audiences coast to coast and around the world with that one. I'm going to go 3-1 as well. I believe in the team being able to handle business. I since the deadline, I feel much more comfortable or confident in their handling business against the middle to slightly above tier. Essentially the tier that they're at and below. Like I don't go into a game like, oh, I don't know if they'll beat whatever crappy team. Like it'll probably be a close run thing against the Jazz. It's like maybe I don't know. They probably win, but it'll be tough. So If the Pacers are down a couple of guys, the Lakers are down a couple of guys, it's not that those are bad teams, but that they're about probably at the Bucks tier right now, and I believe in the Bucks being able to handle that.
And then I believe Luka is also was like
injured.
grabbing his back in that Lakers game. Like he was like Luka always looks like he's laboring, but like he was dealing with some back problems in that game.
Yeah.
So the Lakers are a little bit beat up right now.
He's been hitting the taco truck culture in LA like crazy, I'm sure. So I too would be grabbing my back if I ate 10 burritos and then had to go play an NBA game. Sorry, Luka. I know you're listening too. Don't mean to disrespect, but let's say 3-1 OKC game will be horrible. And we'll be back next week to break it all down. Thank you, Jack, for joining me. Thank you all for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're listening, subscribe, send to people. Leave us a review. We always appreciate reviews, good, bad. Otherwise, your reviews help us kind of craft what this is going to be going into the future. And of course, everything over at brewhoop.com, game coverage before, after, and during. We have our columns each week. We are going to have more analysis as the race to the playoffs gets underway here. We appreciate you listening, and we will talk to you again very soon.